There are moments that split life into before and after. Mine happened on a lonely road, during a storm, when a stranger stopped his truck and looked at me in a way that made my heart race. My name is Gabriel, 28 years old, a graphic designer. I left São Paulo for Águas Claras, a small coastal town down south where everybody's in everybody else's business. Here, being openly gay means a weird kind of isolation, invisible but constant. People are nice enough, but they keep their distance, like my sexuality might be catching. I was driving home on the coastal road after a stressful meeting. The rough sea on one side, the forest on the other, and the sky darkening with heavy clouds. And then it happened. First, there was a strange noise from the engine, a metallic, scraping sound that immediately made me grip the wheel tighter. Then smoke began to come from the hood, thin at first, then thicker, with a sharp smell of burning oil that filled the car's cabin. My heart was already racing, but when the engine simply died, when all the power was gone and the car started losing speed even with my foot still on the gas, panic took over. I managed to steer the car onto the narrow shoulder before it stopped completely. I turned everything off, unbuckled, took a deep breath. The rain started at that exact moment. Not that light coastal drizzle, but a violent storm that turned the world outside into a curtain of water. The sound of rain hammering the roof was deafening. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course, that stretch of road was known for poor reception. I looked around. There were no houses, no shops, absolutely nothing but dense forest on one side and the raging ocean on the other. The road was deserted. No one usually passed by after 6 in the evening, and it was nearly 7. Have you ever felt that kind of loneliness that presses down on your shoulders like a cold hand? That moment when you realize you're completely alone, vulnerable, and any decision you make now could have consequences you can't predict. That's exactly how I felt. I waited about 5 minutes inside the car, watching the rain, hoping some miracle would happen. That the engine would start again, that my phone signal would return, that someone would pass by. Anything. Nothing. I was completely alone, vulnerable. And I had no idea that in a few minutes, that deserted road would be the stage for the most important encounter of my life. I stepped out into the storm, soaked within seconds. I lifted the hood and looked at the engine. I had no idea what I was looking for. I'm a designer, not a mechanic. But I needed to try something to feel some control. I fiddled with wires, looked for loose parts. Nothing made sense. That's when I heard an engine. I turned and saw headlights cutting through the rain. A hefty truck was approaching slowly. My first instinct was relief. Someone. Another person. Help. But immediately after came fear. Because I was alone, on a deserted road, completely vulnerable. And I didn't know who was in that truck. I didn't know if it was someone willing to help, or someone who'd see me as an easy target. My mind flashed through all the news stories I'd read about bad things happening on lonely roads. The truck slowed and stopped behind my car. Its headlights stayed on, lighting me up as if I were on a stage. I couldn't see who was in the cab because the glare blinded me. I stood frozen beside the open hood, the rain pouring over me, my heart pounding for completely different reasons now. The truck door opened. And then he climbed down. But when the light revealed his face, the fear shifted into an even bigger shock. Heavy boots splashed in the puddle, grease-stained jeans, broad shoulders under a blue shirt, a scruffy beard. When he looked at me, I recognized him immediately. Marcos, the mechanic. We'd never talked, but in Águas Claras you know everyone. I'd seen him at the shop, always focused, quiet. I also knew what everyone knew. Marcos was the traditional type. Hardworking, masculine, reserved. He had a girlfriend. In short, completely, unquestionably straight. He came up to my car, his boots thudding in the muddy shoulder. He didn't run or rush, even in the heavy rain. There was something calm about him. A rock-solid presence that made the chaos of the storm feel manageable. When he got close enough, he looked at the engine first, then at me. His eyes were dark, almost black under the weak headlight. And there was something in that look. Something I couldn't name but felt like an electric current running up my spine. Got a problem? He asked. His voice was deep and rough, with a slow southern drawl that made even two simple words sound deliberate. I tried to answer, but my voice came out shaky. I cleared my throat, adjusted my wet glasses on my face, tried again. The engine died, I managed to say. It started making a strange noise and then released smoke and just stopped. I don't know what happened. He nodded, as if that were completely expected. Mind if I take a look? Sure, please, I answered too quickly, the relief obvious in my voice. Marcos bent over the engine. I watched his big, calloused hands working the wires with a hypnotic confidence. I realized, with embarrassment, that I couldn't stop staring. The wet hair, the concentration, the muscles beneath his shirt. My heart sped up. I tried to blame the adrenaline, but I knew that was a lie. It was attraction. Attraction to a straight mechanic on a deserted road. Dangerous. Any misread signal out there could end badly. I shoved my hands in my pockets, adjusted my glasses, and tried to ignore the smell of oil and rain coming off him. After a few minutes inspecting the engine, Marcos straightened up and looked me square in the eyes. There was something different about the way he looked at me. It wasn't just the look of a mechanic assessing a problem. It was more attentive, more careful, as if he was really seeing me, not just looking through me like most people in Aguas Claras did. "The head gasket blew," he said. "And there's oil leaking too. Can't fix it out here on the road. You'll need to take it to a shop." My stomach dropped. "How long will it take?" He shrugged. "Depends on the part. If I have it at the shop, I can do it tonight. If not, I'll need to order it. Could take until tomorrow." I was stuck. No other mechanics around, no way to call for a tow truck without cell signal, and the storm wasn't letting up. "Okay," I said. "What do I do?" Marcos looked at my car, then at his truck. "I can tow it to my shop. It's about 15 minutes from here. You can come in the truck with me, then we'll see what to do." The way he said, "You can come in the truck with me," did something strange in my stomach. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't inappropriate. It was just a practical, logical offer. But there was an implied intimacy there that made me nervous in a way I couldn't explain. "Okay," I said. "Thank you. Really thank you for stopping." He nodded, a brief economical gesture, then turned to grab the towing gear from the truck. I stood there, soaked, shivering a little from the cold, watching him work. Marcos worked with silent efficiency. He secured the cables, adjusted the connections, double-checked everything's safety. His movements were precise, no wasted motion. There was a kind of beauty in that, how he simply knew what to do and did it without hesitation. In less than 10 minutes, my car was hitched to his truck, ready to be towed. Marcos made one last adjustment and then turned to me. "Ready? You can get in the truck." I followed him to the cab. He opened the passenger door for me, a kindness I didn't expect, that caught me completely off guard. I climbed up into the high seat. The warm, dry air inside was a shock after the cold, wet outside. It smelled like coffee, motor oil, and something I couldn't quite place, something just masculine. He closed the door, isolating us in the warm cab. The silence was intimate, heavy. Marcos drove calmly. No need for small talk. Nervous, I tried to fill the void. "You have a shop near town?" "Just outside Aguas Claras. Marcos Auto Repair." "I've driven past it before. Looks like you've got business." "Enough to keep me busy." Silence again. I adjusted my glasses. That's when I realized. He was watching me in the rear view. Eyes on the road, then on me. Repeatedly. It didn't feel like just concerned Good Samaritan energy. It was attentive. Personal. Our eyes met in the mirror. Just a second, but the air changed. A silent question. Marcos looked away, jaw tight, fingers gripping the wheel. Was I imagining things? Projecting desires? The uncertainty was terrifying and exhilarating. The storm kept raging outside. Rain pelted the glass. Headlights cut through the darkness. And inside that truck, in that small, warm space, I was hyper-aware of every movement he made, every breath, every time his eyes returned to me through that mirror. "How long have you lived in Aguas Claras?" His voice cut the silence suddenly, catching me off guard. "About 6 months," I answered. "I moved from São Paulo. I work in graphic design, remotely, so I can live anywhere. I wanted somewhere quieter." He nodded, like that made sense. Sometimes quiet is good, less noise, fewer people. "Exactly," I agreed. "Though sometimes quiet also means less connection, you know? Fewer chances to meet people." Why had I said that? Why had I let that vulnerability slip out? Marcos was quiet for a moment. Then he said, almost too low to hear over the rain, "Yeah, sometimes it's like that." And there was something in his tone. Something that sounded almost like understanding. As if he knew that feeling of isolation too. Even living in the town his whole life. I kept watching him through the rearview, wanting to ask more. Wanting to understand why that straight stranger was making me feel things I shouldn't be feeling. But I asked nothing. I just sat there, wet and shivering slightly from the cold, while he drove through the storm. And then, once more, our eyes met in the mirror. This time he didn't look away right away. He looked at me. Really looked. For 2-3 seconds that seemed to stretch forever. And in that look was something I couldn't name. Something that went far beyond roadside help. Something that made my heart race and my breathing uneven. What was that? Who was this man? And why, of all the people who could have stopped on that deserted road, had it been him? The shop was small oil and metal smell mixed with something familiar, but warm. He parked and led me into the office next door. "Have a seat, I'll take a look at the car." "Thanks. Sorry for the trouble." "It's no trouble," he said, with that same attentive look. He left, leaving me alone with the smell of coffee and my heart racing. It wasn't just the car. It was him. His presence in the next room affected me in a way it shouldn't have. I heard metallic sounds coming from the workshop. The click of tools, the creak of something being moved. And then, after maybe 10 minutes that felt much longer, he came back. He wiped his hands on an old rag and looked at me. "It's the water pump," he said. "I need to order the part. It won't arrive until tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I repeated, and my voice came out lower than I intended. He nodded. "Sorry. I know it's not what you wanted to hear." "No, it's okay," I said quickly. "I understand. These things happen." There was a brief silence, and then he turned to the coffee maker. "Coffee?" he asked. "Please." He grabbed 2 mugs old, mismatched, one with a faded Auto Parts logo barely visible, and poured the coffee carefully, like it mattered. He handed me one and sat in the other chair, closer than I expected. In that tight space, our knees almost touched. I took a sip. It was strong, bitter, hot, perfect. "Good coffee," I said. He gave a half smile. "It's old, but it works." We sat in silence for a moment, just drinking coffee while the rain kept falling outside. The air was heavy, loaded with unspoken words. Then he spoke, dropping a line that changed everything. "I see you around town sometimes." My heart jumped. "You see me?" "Yeah, at the coffee shop mostly. Sometimes walking around." "How long have you been here?" 6 months, I said. "I'm from São Paulo originally. I do graphic design remote work, so I can be anywhere." "And you picked here?" "I did," I confirmed, suddenly needing both hands on my mug. I wanted somewhere quieter, somewhere I could just exist. He nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Born and raised here," he said. "Still here." "Right," I said, and I wasn't really lying, just not telling the whole truth. "Family here?" "No, it's just me. Just you," he repeated, giving the words weight. "And you?" "My mom. And I have a girlfriend." The word landed heavy. Girlfriend. Of course he did. My stupid hope wilted. "Nice. Been together long?" 3 years. He glanced down at his mug, uncomfortable. "Yeah. 3 years." He didn't sound happy about it. He didn't sound like someone in love. Didn't sound like someone talking about someone they care about. He sounded like someone checking a box, going through the motions. And maybe I was projecting. Maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see because I was desperate for any sign that I wasn't completely crazy for feeling what I felt. But I didn't think I was. I took another sip of coffee, trying to calm myself, trying not to let my mind go to dangerous places. But it was hard. So hard when he was sitting there so close to me, smelling of work and rain and something that was just his, with those big, strong hands holding the mug like it was delicate. "Do you like it here?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "Aguas claras?" "I do," I said honestly. "It's peaceful. People leave me alone." "People leave you alone," he repeated. And there was something in the way he said it, as if he understood more than I had said, as if he knew what I really meant by those words. I looked at him and our eyes met, and this time neither of us looked away right away. We just sat there, looking at each other, and there was something in the air between us, something electric, something that made my heart race and my breath hitch, something impossible to name but impossible to ignore. Then he blinked and looked away, clearing his throat. "I'm going to check a few things outside," he said, getting up quickly. "You can stay here, make yourself comfortable." And he left before I could answer. I sat there, alone again, the coffee mug in my hands, and my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it even out there. What was happening? Why had he looked at me that way? Why did I feel like something was building between us? Something dangerous and frightening and completely impossible. He had a girlfriend, he was straight. I was imagining things, I had to be. But then why, when our eyes met, did it feel like the whole world had stopped? I stayed there for another half hour while Marcos worked. I heard him moving around the shop, the sound of tools, heavy footsteps. Occasionally he passed the office door, shot me a quick look, sometimes gave a slight nod. And each time that happened, my stomach tightened. Finally, when the rain began to ease a bit, he came back. He wiped his hands again, leaned against the wall, looked at me. "So," he said, "I need to order the part first thing tomorrow morning. It'll take all day to arrive and I'll install it. Do you need a ride home?" I looked at him, at those dark, serious, careful eyes, at the hands still dirty from working on my car, at the way he was looking at me, as if my answer mattered more than it should. I knew that decision was dangerous. Accepting wasn't just accepting a ride. It was accepting to step into his world. I should say yes. Of course I should. It was late, I was tired, soaked, needed to get home, take a hot shower, forget this strange, confusing night. But if I said yes, he would take me home, and that would be it. I would never know what those looks meant. I would never understand why my heart raced like that when I was near him. I would never find out if what I was feeling was real, or just the lonely imagination of a gay man isolated in a small town desperate for connection. "Yes," I said at last, my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. "I would appreciate a ride." He nodded. "Let me just lock up here." I stood up, still holding the empty coffee mug, not knowing where to put it. Marcos took it from my hands, our fingers brushing briefly in the process. And in that touch, that second of skin-on-skin contact, I felt an electric jolt run down my arm. Our eyes met again. And this time, I was sure he felt it too. I saw it in his eyes. I saw it in the way he held his breath, in the way his fingers hesitated before letting go of the mug. "Come on," he said, his voice a little hoarse. And as I followed him out of the shop into the rainy, dark night, my heart pounding wildly in my chest, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Something was happening here. Something neither of us was saying out loud. Something that filled me with terror and hope in equal measure. And I had no idea what would come next. But part of me, the part that had been alone for so long, the part that yearned for real, authentic connection even if it was impossible, even if it was dangerous, that part wanted desperately to find out. Marcos opened the pickup truck door for me. I got in. The seat was still warm from when we had arrived. He walked around, got into the driver's side, and started the engine. The rain had eased into a light drizzle. The windshield wipers moved at a slow, steady pace. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Almond Street, number 42, I said, "near the square." He nodded and began to drive, and as we drove through the empty, dark streets of Aguas Claras, the soft rain falling around us, the silence between us stretching heavy and full of everything we weren't saying, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life, or if perhaps, for the first time in a long while, I was doing exactly what I should be doing, following that impossible attraction, accepting that ride, letting that straight man with a girlfriend take me home, and finding out, once and for all, if what I saw in those eyes was real, or just another illusion on the long list of illusions I had created to make my loneliness more bearable. The rain kept falling gently as we made our way through the deserted streets of Aguas Claras. The streetlights cast golden halos in the mist, turning the familiar town into something almost unreal, as if we'd stepped into another world where normal rules didn't apply. Marcos drove slowly, slower than the speed limit. His fingers tapped against the steering wheel, a nervous beat that didn't match the calm, controlled person I'd seen earlier. I should have said something, given directions to my house, thanked him for the ride, and ended that strange, charged night before I did something stupid. But I couldn't, because, for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. And the idea of going back to my empty apartment, closing the door, and returning to that suffocating silence that had become my life in Aguas Claras was unbearable. So I let the silence stretch. I let that impossible moment keep existing. And Marcos didn't ask where to go. He simply kept driving, as if he didn't want the night to end either, as if he was running from something too. We passed the town square, empty at this hour. Closed storefronts. The coffee shop where I'd been every morning for 6 months. Ordinary places that felt like alien landscapes in the rain and darkness. It was Marcos who broke the silence. "Do you live alone?" His voice was low, almost swallowed by the sound of rain on the truck roof. "I do." I adjusted my glasses, that nervous gesture that always gave me away. "I moved here about 6 months ago. I work from home, so I don't need to be anywhere specific." "I see." He paused for a long beat, and I saw his fingers tighten on the wheel. "And, as you said before, do you like the peace here?" There was something in the way he asked. It wasn't small talk. It was a real question, weighted, as if my answer truly mattered. I took a deep breath. "It's peaceful. Different from São Paulo, where I used to live. Less pressure, you know? People here kind of leave you alone. Less pressure." He repeated the words slowly, as if testing their taste. "That's an interesting way to put it." I turned to look at him, trying to read his expression in the dim cabin. "What do you mean?" Marco slowed even more, nearly stopping in the middle of the empty street. His jaw was tight, and there was something in the way he stared ahead, refusing to meet my eyes, that made my heart race. I don't know. Most people who move away from somewhere like this, they're running towards something bigger. You came here instead. Is that weird? I sounded defensive. No. He finally looked at me, and there was something in those eyes that took my breath away. Not weird. It's either brave or... You were running from something. Running from something. The words hung heavy between us. Yeah, that's it. I'm running from something. Marcos nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he'd already suspected. He turned his eyes back to the road, but his expression had changed. Less guarded, more vulnerable. I have a girlfriend. The words came out harsh, sudden. 3 years. Her family's practically part of mine. Everyone expects me to, you know. The air in the truck got thin. That's a long time. Yeah. His voice didn't sound right, like he was reciting lines. Everyone expects the right thing. The right thing. There was so much weight in those 3 words you could almost feel them physically. I stared out the window, watching raindrops run down the glass, distorting the lights outside. My mind raced, trying to figure out why he was telling me that. Why now? Why in that tone of voice that sounded less like celebration and more like a confession of guilt? "And do you want to?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Marry her?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heart beating. I could hear Marcos's breathing, a little faster than usual. I could hear the rain, the truck's engine, the whole world seeming to hold its breath waiting for his answer. "I should want to," he finally said, and his voice was so low I had to lean in to hear. She's good. She's beautiful. Any guy would be happy. My family would be proud. The whole town. Everyone would think it's right. But you don't want to." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And as soon as the words left his mouth, I knew he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Then, without me realizing it, Marcos pulled over. We were parked at the overlook on the edge of town, that spot where kids go to party and couples go when they want privacy. The ocean stretched out in front of us, black and endless, just the sound of waves in the darkness. He turned the engine off. The silence in the cab without the engine noise was oppressive, intimate, dangerous. "You don't know me, Gabriel." His voice was rough. "You don't know who I actually am." "I know you're a mechanic," I said quietly. "I know the whole town thinks you're solid. The guy everyone can count on. The guy with everything figured out." He laughed, but it came out wrong. No humor in it at all. "Yeah, the guy who's got it all figured out. You have any idea what that feels like? How many people are counting on you? How much you have to pretend?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I do. I know exactly what that's like. I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone needed. The right kind of son, the right kind of friend, the person who doesn't make waves. And do you know what happens?" He was looking at me now, and his eyes had something desperate in them. "You can't keep it up. At some point, all that pretending starts crushing you. At some point, you have to pick the person everyone wants you to be or the person you actually are." Marcos closed his eyes. His breathing was rough, his hands clenched tight on his thighs. "What if?" His voice cracked. "What if you don't even know who you are? What if you're too scared to find out?" "Then you're trapped," I said, and I felt tears start to blur my vision. "You're alone, even when you're with people. Every day you put on a mask and hope no one sees through it. Eventually you can't remember if there's anything real under there at all." "Why did you come here?" Marcos asked suddenly, his eyes intense on mine. The real reason, not the story about peace. My throat felt like it was closing. Because I was tired. I whispered it. Tired of pretending. Tired of going out and being visible but invisible at the same time. Everyone knowing what I was, but nobody really knowing me. I thought if I came somewhere small, where nobody knew me, maybe I could just be myself. Without all the rules about how to be gay, right? How to be acceptable. Maybe I could just breathe. Did it work? His voice was raw, like the question cost him something. No. For the first time, I really felt the weight of that. I'm still invisible. Just different. I'm the weird guy who works from home and doesn't go out. I'm alone, and back in Sao Paulo at least there were people who got it, who understood what it meant to be like me. Marcos looked at his own hands. Sometimes. He began, and his voice was so low I could barely hear over the rain. Sometimes you just want to be yourself. No explanations. No expectations. Not having to be what everyone needs you to be. And your voice cracked on the last word. It really broke, splitting like glass under pressure, and I saw a single tear run down his face before he wiped it away angrily, as if furious with himself for letting it be there. My heart stopped. Because in that moment, in that fraction of a second when all of Marcos's armor collapsed, I saw everything he was hiding. All the pain and fear and desire and confusion he carried alone, with no one to tell, no one who understood. I saw myself reflected in him. Marcos. I reached out without thinking, without planning, just needing him to know he wasn't alone. He looked at my outstretched hand like it was an alien creature. Dangerous, tempting. "I need to," he started, then stopped. He swallowed. "There's a tool in the glove box. Can you grab it for me?" The sudden shift hurt. He was clearly retreating. But I nodded, my hand falling back to my lap, feeling the weight of rejection settle in my chest. I opened the glove box, rifling through old maps and crumpled papers. A small flashlight, jumper cables, and at the back, a small wrench. "This one?" I asked, picking up the tool. "Yes, that one." I turned to hand the wrench to him, and our hands touched. It was barely anything. Our fingers brushed as the wrench moved between us. A few seconds of skin touching skin, heat and roughness and solid contact. It felt electric. He didn't let go. I didn't pull away. We were frozen there. That one point of contact somehow becoming the only thing that existed. I could feel his heartbeat under my hand, fast, uneven, like mine. He looked at our hands, then at me and his face. God, his face was terror and something else. Something I couldn't name. Something that made my chest hurt and my breathing stop. Gabriel. My name came out like a prayer, like a plea for help, like a confession. And I knew in that moment that everything was about to change. We were standing at the edge of a cliff. It was only a question of whether we would fall together. We'd crossed some line. The man holding my hand around this wrench, sitting in the rain, was just as lost and scared and starving for connection as I was. And that both of us were about to do something we couldn't undo. I couldn't move. His hand was over mine, still wrapped around the wrench I'd picked up for him, and neither of us let go. Neither of us breathed. Neither of us dared to say out loud what was happening in that parked truck under the rain. The metal was cold against my palm. His hand was warm, calloused, steady, and completely still, as if he too were trapped in that moment, unable to retreat, unable to advance, suspended somewhere between fear and something I didn't dare name. My heart was beating so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. My glasses fogged from the closeness, from the heat radiating from that tiny space between our bodies. I should pull back. I should drop the tool. I should force a nervous laugh and make some stupid joke to break that unbearable tension. But I couldn't. Because when I looked up, when I met his eyes, I saw something that took all the air from my lungs at once. Pure terror. Terror mixed with something so vulnerable, so raw, so desperate that it made my chest ache with a physical pain. "Marcos," I whispered. My voice was weak, broken. It wasn't a question. It was a plea, a supplication. "Please tell me I'm not imagining this. Please tell me you feel it too." He closed his eyes, squeezed them shut, as if trying to block out the world, to block me, to block that moment that threatened to destroy everything he'd built around himself. And then, very slowly, he let go of the tool. The absence of touch was like a shock of ice water. I recoiled instinctively, my breathing quickening, my face burning with shame and confusion. I'd ruined everything. I'd misread it. He was going to ask me to get out. He'd look at me with disgust. Gabriel. My name came out as a broken prayer. Like a confession torn out of him. Like something so loaded with pain I felt it in my bones. I stopped. Froze. Waited. Marcos opened his eyes, but didn't look at me. He stared at a point beyond the fogged windshield, at the rain running down the glass, anywhere but my face. He began, and his voice sounded different, hoarse, trembling, human in a way I'd never heard before. "I don't know how to say this." "Say what?" Silence. Just the rain, just our hearts beating out of sync, just the crushing weight of everything left unsaid. He ran his hand over his face, and when it shook I realized he was fighting something so big, so overwhelming it threatened to consume him whole. "Have you ever felt," he began slowly, each word carefully chosen as if he were walking on thin ice, "like you're living someone else's life?" I blinked. That wasn't what I expected. Not even close. What do you mean? Marcos took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling with the effort of holding it together. Like waking up every day and putting on a uniform that isn't yours, and saying words that aren't yours, and living a story someone wrote for you before you even had a chance to find out which story you wanted to tell. My heart stopped, because I knew that feeling. Knew it intimately. Knew it with every fiber of my being. Yes, I whispered. I know exactly what that's like. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and the intensity in those eyes nearly knocked me over. I grew up in this town, he said, his voice low, almost a murmur. I learned early on how a man should be, how he should speak, how he should walk, what he should want. And I learned it well, Gabriel. I learned it so well I almost convinced myself it was true. Almost, I repeated, my voice barely audible. Almost. The word hung between us, heavy with years of denial, repression, living a lie so complete it became indistinguishable from the truth. I opened the workshop when I was 23, he continued, and now the words began to flow faster, as if a dam had broken. I married. Or almost married. I had a girlfriend that everyone expected me to propose to. A good girl, from a decent family, everything proper. He gave a bitter laugh that wasn't funny at all, and I almost did it, almost proposed. Because that's what everyone expected. It was the script, the uniform, the life someone had written for me. Why didn't you propose? Silence again. But this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone gathering the courage to jump off a cliff. Because, he said slowly, looking straight into my eyes, every time I tried to imagine the future with her, the only thought that came to mind was, this will kill me. Not today. Not tomorrow. But slowly. Day by day. It will erase who I really am until there is nothing left but an empty shell going through life on autopilot. Tears burned in my eyes. I blinked hard, trying to hold them back, but it was useless. Because those words were mine. They were my story. They were the reason I had run from São Paulo, left my family, my friends, everything familiar, to come to this small town where no one knew me, and I could finally stop pretending. I understand, I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. I understand perfectly. And you? He asked gently, leaning slightly toward me, his eyes searching mine. What's your story, Gabriel? Why are you here? In this town, alone. It was my turn to look away. My turn to feel the crushing weight of the unsaid truth. Because in São Paulo I began, my voice so small, so vulnerable, I had to be the son my parents wanted. The friend everyone expected. The guy who had a girlfriend and talked about marriage and pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I looked at him again, and this time I didn't look away. I didn't run. I just let him see everything. The pain, the fear, the loneliness of living an entire life as someone you're not. So I came here, I continued. I thought that in a small town where nobody knew me, I could finally be myself. I could stop pretending. I could just exist. And did you succeed? I gave a humorless laugh. I found out you can run from a lot of things, but not from yourself. Because even here, even with no one knowing me, I was still afraid. Afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged, afraid of wanting something I shouldn't want. The last part came out as a whisper, like a confession I had never spoken aloud to anyone. Marcos went very quiet, so quiet I could hear my own heart beating, his every breath, every raindrop hitting the roof of the truck. And when he spoke, his voice carried such raw emotion it made my skin crawl. What kind of thing you shouldn't want? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but look at that man sitting so close to me, so vulnerable, so broken and honest and real. Things that would complicate everything, I whispered. Things that would make people look at me differently. Things that could hurt me, or things that could save you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, because he was right. God, he was so right. My whole life I had convinced myself that wanting what I wanted was dangerous. It was wrong. It was something that had to be buried, denied, suppressed until it no longer existed. But sitting there, in that truck, looking at Marcos, I realized something. It wasn't my desires that were killing me. It was their denial. Marcos, I began, but my voice failed. He leaned in even closer, and now we were so close I could see the small scars on his hands, the weariness around his eyes, the naked, raw vulnerability in every line of his face. "Say it," he whispered. "What do you want, Gabriel?" My breathing was uneven. My heart raced so fast I thought it would burst. My hands shook. And then, very gently, so gently it almost didn't happen, our fingers touched again. This time it wasn't by accident. Not because of a tool. It was intentional, deliberate. A touch so light, so tentative, so loaded with fear and hope and desire that tears finally slipped from my eyes. Marcos looked at our hands, at our fingers intertwined so fragilely, so uncertainly, as if any sudden move could break the spell. And then he looked at me, and the expression on his face. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't rejection. It was a mirror. It was recognition. It was the look of someone who finally, after years of pretending, had found another human being who understood, who knew, who felt the same thing. "Me too," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Me too, Gabriel." And in that moment, something changed. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to put into words what happens when you've spent your whole life feeling alone, different, wrong, and suddenly you find someone who sees you, really sees you, and doesn't turn away. It was as if the air around us had changed density, as if time had slowed down, as if the universe had held its breath with us. "Talk to me," I begged, my voice barely functioning. "Tell me what you're thinking." Marcos closed his eyes again, but this time his hand didn't move away from mine. If anything, his fingers tightened a little, as if anchoring himself to me. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that I spent years telling myself what I felt was wrong, that it was a phase, that it would pass, that if I just ignored it, eventually I'd stop, stopping myself from feeling this way." He opened his eyes, and there were tears there now too. "But it didn't pass, Gabriel. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how many times I told myself it was impossible, that it was wrong, that I needed to be normal, it never passed." "Normal," I repeated bitterly. What a horrible word. "The worst," he agreed. "Because what is normal, really? Living a lie? Pretending to be someone you're not? Dying slowly inside while everyone around you applauds how well you're sticking to the script?" Exactly. We stayed there, hands locked, eyes fixed on each other, breaths synchronized, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel alone. "I saw you," Marcos said suddenly, "months ago, at the bakery. You were buying bread, talking to Donna Maria, and you laughed at something she said. And I stopped. I just stopped and watched. My heart sped up. Because there was something about you," he continued, his voice getting softer, more intimate. "Something in the way you moved, the way you spoke, the way you existed in the world. It was as if you had permission to be yourself. As if you had found a way out of the prison the rest of us are still trapped in." "I didn't escape," I whispered. "I just stopped fighting so hard. I wanted to ask how." "Why didn't you ask?" He let out that bitter laugh again. "Because I was cowardly. Because I still had a girlfriend. Because I was still pretending. Because I didn't have the courage to admit that what I felt when I saw you was... He stopped, bit his lip, looked away. What was it? I pressed gently. Silence. And then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Hope. The word hovered between us. Small, fragile, but infinitely powerful. Hope, I echoed. He nodded, still not looking at me. Hope that maybe I wasn't alone. That maybe there was another person in this town who understood. Who felt the same. Who wouldn't look at me with disgust or pity if I finally told the truth. You are not alone, I said, squeezing his hand. You never were. He looked at our intertwined hands, and I saw something break inside him. Some wall he had built over years, brick by brick, began to crack. I'm so scared, he whispered. I know. Me too. What are you afraid of? Everything, I admitted. Of wanting something and not being able to have it. Of being honest and being rejected. Of finally finding someone who sees me and discovering it was only my imagination. Of this being real, he interrupted softly. Yes, of this being real and me not knowing what to do with it. Marcos was quiet for a long moment. And then, very slowly, he turned his hand so our palms met completely. Skin against skin. Calluses against softness. Warmth against warmth. What if we didn't know, he asked. What if we just felt? My breath caught, because those words were dangerous. They were a promise. They were a door opening to something I didn't know if I was ready to walk through. But when I looked at him, at the raw vulnerability in his eyes, at the way he was offering himself, exposing himself, risking himself, I knew. I knew that if I pulled back now, if I let fear win, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So, very slowly, very carefully, I interlaced my fingers with his, and this time I didn't let go. Marcos exhaled shakily, as if he'd been holding his breath for years and could finally release it. And then he did something that stopped my heart. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile, not confident or assured. It was small, trembling, uncertain. But it was real, and it was for me. Gabriel, he said, and my name on his lips sounded like music. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this means. I don't know what happens after this. I don't either, I admitted. But maybe we don't need to know yet. Maybe, I agreed. Maybe it's enough just to be here. Now. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. And we stayed like that. Hands entwined, eyes locked, hearts beating as one. Two men sitting in an old truck in the rain, holding each other as if they were holding life itself. Because in a way, we were. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't hiding. I was just being. And he was letting me. The rain kept falling outside, but in here, in this small space between us, there was warmth. There was acceptance. There was something so fragile and new and terrifying that neither of us dared name it. How long did we stay like that? I don't know. It could have been seconds. It could have been hours. Time lost its meaning. And then, suddenly, Marcos laughed. It was unexpected. Loud. Almost hysterical. I blinked, confused. What? He shook his head, still laughing, but there was an edge of nervousness there. A barely contained panic. I just realized how crazy this all is. I'm sitting in my own truck, holding the hand of a guy I barely know, having the most honest conversation of my life, and I don't even know his last name. The laugh was a defense. I knew that. I recognized the pattern because I did the same thing when things got too intense, too vulnerable, too real. It was easier to laugh than to face the weight of what was happening. Silva, he said calmly. Gabriel Silva. He looked at me, the laugh dying on his lips. "Marcos Oliveira," he answered, his voice becoming serious again. And then, very softly, "It's good to truly meet you, Gabriel Silva." My chest tightened, because those simple words carried so much weight, so much meaning. It wasn't just an introduction. It was an acknowledgement, a pact, an admission that what was happening between us was real, was important, and wasn't just going to disappear when the rain stopped. "It's good to truly meet you too, Marcos Oliveira," I whispered. He looked at our hands still intertwined, and something shifted in his expression. The lightness of the laugh was gone, replaced by something darker, heavier, fear. "Gabriel," he began slowly, and I could hear the struggle in his voice. I don't know if I can do this." "Do what?" He made a vague gesture between us. "This. Whatever this is, I have a life. I have a reputation. I have people who expect things from me. And what if someone finds out that we..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because I understood. I understood the fear. The panic of living in a small town where everyone knows everyone. Where gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Where being different makes you a target. "No one has to find out," I said gently. "This can stay between us, just between us." He looked at me with an expression so devastated my heart broke. "But I'll know," he whispered. "I'll know I'm lying again, hiding again, pretending again, and I don't know if I can keep doing that, Gabriel. Not after today. Not after finally being honest with someone. So, what do you want?" The question hung between us, and Marcos didn't answer. He just looked at me, with those eyes full of terror and desire and confusion and hope and 1,000 other emotions I couldn't name. And in that look, I saw everything. I saw a man on the edge of a cliff, looking down, knowing that if he jumped, there would be no going back. His life as he knew it would end. Everything he'd built, every carefully maintained facade, would crumble. But I also saw something else. I saw a man desperate to jump, desperate to finally be free. And I didn't know if he would find the courage. I didn't know if I would find the courage. I didn't know if either of us was strong enough to face what came next. "Marcos," I started, but my voice failed. Because what could I say? That everything would be fine? That people would understand? That there would be no consequences? I'd be lying, and we had both already lived enough lies for a lifetime. So, instead of speaking, I just squeezed his hand and waited. I waited to see if he would let go, if he'd recoil, if fear would win. But he didn't let go. He just stayed there, holding my hand, looking at me with that devastated and terrified and hopeful expression. And the silence stretched between us. A silence so heavy, so charged, so absolutely unbearable that I felt it physically pressing against my chest. And in Marcos's face, I saw all that he wasn't saying. Terror, desire, possibility, end or beginning. I didn't know which. And while the rain kept falling and our hands stayed intertwined and our eyes remained fixed on each other, only one absolute certainty echoed in my mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. It didn't matter what happened next. It didn't matter if he chose to move forward or step back. This moment, this connection, this brutal and beautiful truth we had shared, had changed something fundamental in both of us, and there was no going back. But the certainty brought with it fear. The paralyzing fear that this silence might stretch on forever. That this perfect moment could be just that. A moment, and nothing more. That the courage I had mustered to keep my hand in his might not be enough to do what I really needed to do. What I wanted to do. What I knew, deep in my soul, needed to happen for this encounter to mean something beyond a beautiful, painful memory. I had to tell the truth. My truth. The one I kept like a heavy secret, even while living openly in Aguas Claras. Because one thing is being openly gay in a small town. A completely different thing is admitting, out loud, to a man you barely know, but who somehow already means more than he should. That you feel utterly isolated, that you're exhausted from pretending everything is fine, that you're tired of smiling politely while hearing jokes that cut deeper than people realize. That you're desperate for a real connection, for someone who truly sees you, and that this desperation scares you because it makes you vulnerable in ways you swore you'd never allow again. My hand started to tremble in his. At first slightly, then noticeably. I tried to control it, but it was impossible, because the fear was turning into panic. The panic that if I told the truth, that magical moment would vanish, that he would let go of my hand, that the warmth in his eyes would turn into discomfort, that he would say something kind but devastating like, "I understand, but," or, "You're a great guy, however," or any of those phrases people use when they want to step back without sounding cruel. Marcos felt the tremor. I saw in his eyes the exact moment he noticed. His hand squeezed mine more firmly, not letting go, and that simple gesture nearly destroyed me, because he could have let go. Maybe he should have, but he didn't. "Gabriel," he said, and my name in his voice sounded different from every other time I'd ever heard it. It sounded like both a question and an answer, like an invitation and an acknowledgement. "What's happening?" And I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I need to tell you something," I began, my voice trembling, fragile. "And I'm really afraid of how you'll react, but I have to say it because if I don't say it now, I never will, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave." He didn't say anything, just waited. That patience of his, that ability to simply be present without pressing, without rushing, gave me the courage I needed. "I'm gay," I said it out loud, and even though he probably already knew, the whole town probably knows, saying the words to him felt like the biggest, scariest thing I'd ever done. "I know you know. But what you need to understand is being here, being me. I've never been this lonely." I took a deep breath, feeling tears sting my eyes but refusing to let them fall. I feel invisible most of the time. People see me, say hello, are polite, but I don't truly exist for them. Not as a whole person. I'm just the gay designer who lives in the blue house by the beach. And I pretended for so long that that was enough, that I was fine alone, that I didn't need anyone, but it's a lie. It's all a lie. I need a lot, and that terrifies me. I couldn't finish, but I had to keep going, and then you show up on this random rainy night and you look at me like you actually see me. You make coffee. You sit close. You listen. You touch me in a way that I couldn't breathe. That makes me feel real. Actually real. And I don't know what to do with that because you're supposed to be. I stopped. I couldn't say it out loud, what we both knew. That he has someone. That he's supposed to be straight. That this shouldn't be happening at all. The silence that followed was deafening. I expected rejection. Expected discomfort. Expected him to let go of my hand and say something kind but final that would close everything right there. Expected that magical moment to shatter and leave me even lonelier than I'd been before. But none of that happened. "I know," Marcos said quietly. "I've always known." I froze. I didn't understand. "What?" "That you're gay. I've known since I first saw you around here months ago." My entire body went still. My heart was beating wrong, too hard, too fast. You knew?" He nodded, and his eyes held something that looked like pain mixed with fear. Like understanding. Like he felt the same thing I did. And he stopped, breathed, started again. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since then." The world stopped spinning. I'm sure of it, because nothing else existed beyond those words, beyond their meaning, beyond the brutal and beautiful impossibility of what he was saying. "Gabriel," He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage, and when he opened them again, there was a vulnerability in them that tore me in half. I've been struggling with thoughts I shouldn't have, thoughts about men, about you. I couldn't breathe. Literally. I don't know what this means, he said fast, like the words might disappear if he didn't get them out. I don't know who I am. I have a girlfriend. I have this whole life. Everyone's expecting me to be the guy who works hard, who gets married, who does everything the right way in this town. He squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt, but I didn't care. I never would. But then I see you in town, and I can't look away. I come up with excuses to go places I know you'll be. I think about talking to you, really talking to you, and I can't lie to myself anymore that this is normal, that it's just... He shook his head. I can't pretend it's something it's not. Tears were running down my face now, but I didn't mind. I couldn't care about anything except his words, the brutal truth he was sharing. And tonight, when I saw your car broken down on that road, he laughed, but there was no humor in it. I knew your car, Gabriel. I knew it was you. I could have just driven past. I should have. But I couldn't. Finally, I had an excuse to actually talk to you without it being weird, without having to explain why. He stopped. Without having to tell you that I can't stop thinking about you in ways I'm terrified of. My whole world had been turned inside out. Everything I thought I knew, everything I assumed about that night, about him, about us, was wrong. Or maybe it was completely right in ways I never imagined possible. You... on purpose? I barely got the words out. Yes. His voice broke. I needed to. I can't keep pretending you're not there. I can't keep living like I'm not. Like seeing you and not being able to even talk to you isn't killing me. We sat there, in that workshop lit by a single bulb, the rain drumming on the metal roof, our hands intertwined, our truths finally exposed between us, raw and frightening and absolutely real. I had no words. There were no words for what I was feeling. Relief so intense it felt like pain. Fear so deep it felt paralyzing. Hope so bright it felt impossible. All at once, all together, everything fighting for space in my chest until I thought I'd burst. I don't know what to do now, I admitted, because it was the truth. I don't know what this means, or what could happen, or if. Me neither, Marcos interrupted, and there was a strange relief in his voice saying that, as if admitting he didn't have the answers was somehow freeing. I don't have answers, Gabriel. I don't know what I am, or what I can offer you, or if I'll be brave enough to do whatever it takes to figure this out. But I know this. He squeezed my hand. This is real. You are real. What I feel when I'm near you is real. And I can't pretend it isn't anymore. We sat in silence for a long moment. A silence different from any other. It wasn't uncomfortable or awkward. It was full of truth and possibility and fear and hope, all mixed in ways I'd never experienced before. What happens now? I finally asked, because someone had to. Marcos looked at our intertwined hands. Then he looked at me. And I saw in his eyes the same confusion, the same fear, the same impossible hope I felt. I don't know, he admitted. I really don't know. And somehow, that honest admission meant more to me than any empty promise ever could have. Because he wasn't offering me certainties that didn't exist. He wasn't making promises he couldn't keep. He was just being brutally, courageously honest about not knowing. And in that moment, that was enough. It had to be enough. Because all I really wanted, all I really needed was to be seen, to be known, to be acknowledged as real by someone who was real with me. And there, in that workshop, with the rain falling outside and our truths finally out in the open, that was exactly what was happening. But there was still an unanswered question hanging in the air between us. A question neither of us had the courage to say out loud, but that we both knew would have to be answered eventually. What does this mean for us? For him? For his carefully constructed life? For his future? He hadn't answered. Not yet. And as I looked at him, seeing the internal struggle reflected in his eyes, I knew I couldn't push, couldn't demand answers he didn't yet have. All I could do was wait. Wait to see if the courage he'd shown by admitting the truth would be enough to carry him forward, or if fear would win, and that perfect and terrible moment would be all we'd have. The rain kept falling, our hands remained intertwined, and the future stayed utterly, terrifyingly uncertain. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain kept its steady drumming on the metal roof, filling the silence with a rhythm that seemed to echo the uneven beats of my heart. I could feel the weight of my unasked question hanging between us, heavy as the damp air in the workshop. What does this mean? For him? For me? For us? Marcos let out a long, slow sigh, and I saw him run his hand over his face, as if trying to wipe away the vulnerability that still shone in his eyes. When he finally looked at me again, there was something different in his expression. Not the paralyzing fear I had seen before, but not the calm certainty that part of me had secretly hoped for either. It was something in between, something that felt frighteningly honest. "I don't know what this means," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I'm not gonna lie to you and say I have answers, because I don't." My stomach tightened. This was what I feared. The confession followed by retreat. The moment of courage followed by the crushing reality of everything he'd have to face if he chose to move forward. But then he continued. "But I know this," Marcos said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that took my breath away. "I know that what I feel when I'm near you is real. I know I stopped at that road today because I recognized your car, and because I wanted an excuse to finally talk to you. I know I've spent the last 6 months seeing you around town, and wondering what it would be like if I had the courage to say hi." Each word fell between us like stones thrown into still water, creating ripples that spread and spread. I know that everything I've built in my life, everything people think they know about me, feels like a lie when I'm sitting here with you, he went on, and there was raw pain in his voice now. "And I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know what to do with this truth." He stopped, took a deep breath, and then said the words I didn't know I needed to hear. "But I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. Not anymore." Something inside me loosened when he said that. It wasn't complete relief, not the perfect answer part of me wanted, but it was honesty. It was authenticity. It was him saying that, even without all the answers, he wasn't going to turn back and pretend this moment never happened. And maybe that was enough. For now. "I don't know what this means either," I admitted, my own voice softer than I expected. "I don't know what happens after this. But I know I don't regret being honest with you. I spent so long feeling invisible in this city, so alone, that I kind of forgot what it's like to be seen. Truly seen." I adjusted my glasses, a nervous gesture I didn't even realize I'd made until it was done. "You saw me," I said simply. "You saw me even before I knew you were looking. And that already changed something in me." Marcos nodded slowly, and I saw his shoulders relax a little, as if my understanding had lifted some of the weight he'd been carrying. "I need time," he said after a moment. "I need to understand what this means for me, who I am when I strip away everyone else's expectations. Is that fair?" "More than fair," I answered immediately. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers now. I just needed you to know the truth. About me. About how I feel." "And now I know," Marcos said, and there was a gentleness in his voice that made my chest ache. "And you know mine." We sat there a little longer, just existing in that space between confession and an uncertain future. The rain outside seemed to be easing, the frantic drum against the metal turning into softer, more spaced-out beats. "Let me drive you home," Marcos said at last, breaking the silence. "It's getting late, I wanted to protest, to stretch this moment forever, suspended in that bubble where the truth had been spoken and nothing had been ruined by it. But I knew I couldn't. Real life waited out there, beyond the doors of this workshop. "Okay," I said quietly. Before we stood up, Marcos took his phone from his pocket and held it out to me. "Give me your number," he said. I don't know when I'll be ready to talk about all this again, but I want to be able to when I am." My hands trembled slightly as I took his phone and typed in my number. When I handed it back, our fingers brushed briefly, and this time neither of us pretended the touch didn't mean something. Marcos typed something quickly into his own phone, and seconds later I felt my pocket buzz. "Now you've got mine too," he said, a small, shy smile on his lips. "For when you want to know about your car, or, I don't know, for when you want to talk." I couldn't help smiling back. "I'll keep that in mind." The ride back to my place was quiet, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence from before. It was different, contemplative. Both of us lost in our own thoughts, processing everything that had happened in those last few hours. As we drove through the wet streets of Aguas Claras, I noticed the rain had stopped completely. The clouds were beginning to part, revealing patches of night sky where stars blinked shyly. When Marcos stopped in front of my building, I hesitated before opening the door. There was so much I wanted to say, but I didn't know how. "Thank you" felt insufficient. "Please don't disappear" felt desperate. "I'll wait as long as you need" felt presumptuous, like I was assuming he'd come back. So I settled for something simple. "Thank you," I said, "for stopping, for helping me, for everything." "You're welcome," Marcos replied, and his eyes met mine in the dark of the truck. "Drive carefully when you pick your car up tomorrow." "I will," I promised. I opened the door and stepped out, the cold night air wrapping around me after the warmth inside the truck. I was almost at the building's entrance when something made me stop and look back. Marcos was still there, the pickup parked in the same spot, and through the windshield I could see he was watching me. He hadn't gotten out yet. He was just sitting there, looking. Our eyes met across the distance, and even from afar I could feel the weight of that stare. There were so many unanswered questions hanging between us. So much fear. So much uncertainty. But there was also something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. I lifted my hand in a small wave. He returned it, a nearly imperceptible flick of his hand against the glass. And then I turned and went into the building, climbing the stairs to my apartment with legs that felt strange and disconnected, as if I'd forgotten how to walk normally. When I closed the door behind me, I leaned against it and let out a long, trembling sigh. My apartment was dark, cold, exactly as I'd left it a few hours earlier. But something inside me was different. I walked to the window that looked out onto the street below, and I looked out. Marcos's pickup was still there, engine running, taillights glowing red on the wet asphalt. How long would he stay there, I wondered? How long would he need before he could drive away? But even as I thought that, I saw the reverse lights come on, and slowly, almost reluctantly, the pickup began to move. It turned the corner and disappeared from view, leaving the street empty and silent. I stood there for a long time, looking at the empty space where he'd been. My mind was full of everything that had happened, every word exchanged, every look shared, every moment of vulnerability we'd let show. He had said he needed time. I could give him that. I had to give him that. But he had also said he wasn't going to pretend it hadn't happened, that what he felt was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start. I took out my phone and looked at the new contact that had appeared. Marcos Oliveira, mechanic. His number was there, saved, real, tangible. I didn't know if he'd call. I didn't know if in a week, or a month, or 6 months, I'd hear that rough voice on the other end of the line. I didn't know if he'd ever have the courage to explore what had been revealed between us today. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone with my hopes. I had been seen, had been heard, had shared my truth and not been rejected for it. And Marcos, this man who was still trying to understand who he was beneath all the expectations and masks, he had shared his truth with me too. Had admitted that what he felt was real, even without knowing what to do with it. We were both scared. We were both uncertain. But we both, for a brief and precious moment, had been completely honest. And that, I realized as I looked up at the night sky through my window, where the clouds were thinning to reveal more and more stars, that was the beginning of something. I didn't know what, didn't know where it would lead, or even if it would lead anywhere. But as I saved Marcos's contact on my phone and slid it back into my pocket, as I stepped away from the window and turned on the lights in my apartment for the first time in hours, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to spend the rest of my life feeling invisible. The possibility that a real, vulnerable, and terrifying connection could exist for me too. The possibility that that moment in the shop, with the rain falling and our truths hanging in the air between us, wasn't an ending, but a beginning. I didn't know if Marcos would call me tomorrow, or next week, or next month. Didn't know if he'd ever find the answers he was looking for, or if he'd be able to reconcile who he was with who he'd thought he had to be. But I knew this. He had stopped, had seen me, had admitted the truth. And sometimes, in real-life stories, that's all you get. No tidy resolutions or guaranteed happy endings. Just honest moments of human connection, where two scared people choose to be vulnerable together, even if only for a few hours on a rainy night. And maybe that, I thought, as I finally stepped away from the window and prepared to try to sleep, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The sky was clearing. And somewhere in this small coastal town, in a shop that smelled of oil and metal and fresh coffee, 2 cups still sat on the table where we'd left them. Silent evidence that something had happened there, that 2 people had sat together and shared their truths, and chosen, despite all the fear and uncertainty, to be honest. I closed my eyes and let that thought wrap around me like a blanket. Tomorrow I would pick up my car. I would see Marcos again. Maybe only for a few minutes while he handed me the keys and explained the repair. Maybe it would be awkward. Maybe it would be uncomfortable. Maybe we'd pretend that tonight's conversation had never happened, keeping a safe distance from each other in the cold light of day. Or maybe not. Maybe he would look at me that way again, that look that said, "I see you," without needing words. Maybe he would touch my hand when he passed me the keys, letting his fingers linger just a second longer than necessary. Maybe he would say something. Maybe I would say something. Or maybe we'd just look at each other, a silent recognition passing between us of everything that had been revealed, of everything still left to discover. I didn't know. And for the first time in a long while, it was okay not to know. Because not knowing meant possibility. It meant the story wasn't finished. That moment in the shop, with our hands tangled and our truths hanging in the air, was a beginning and not an end. And as I finally lay down in my bed, still wearing the soaked clothes I'd worn in the rain, I held my phone to my chest and let my eyes close. Tomorrow would come, and with it, all the uncertainty and fear and possibility it would bring. But for now, in this moment, I had this. The memory of being seen, of being honest, of sharing something real with another human who was also scared, also lost, but who had chosen to be brave with me anyway. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start over. Not a happy ending. Not yet. Maybe never. but an honest beginning. And sometimes, in the best kinds of stories, that's exactly where you need to be.